The signal came without warning. It tore through the communication networks of the Galactic Concord like a scream in the night. Every station, every ship, every colony world with a receiver heard the same desperate message. The voice belonged to High Speaker Veltan of the Velkari, one of the oldest and most respected species in the known galaxy. His words were broken by static and fear. This is an emergency transmission to all Concord members. Our homeworld is under attack. The silence has returned. We are dying. Please, anyone, help us. The message repeated 3 times before cutting to static. In the great council chambers of Station Prime, representatives from 47 species sat in stunned silence. The silence was supposed to be a myth, a story from ancient times. A machine swarm that emerged from the darkness between galaxies every few thousand years to consume civilizations and then vanish again. The last recorded attack had happened 12,000 years ago, before most current Concord species had achieved spaceflight. "This must be a mistake," said the Torellian ambassador, his blue skin pale with shock. "The silence is not real. It is a legend used to frighten children." "The Velkari do not send false distress calls," replied the ancient Muvan delegate, her crystalline body humming with distress. "If High Speaker Veltan says the silence has come, then it has come." Arguments erupted across the chamber. Some demanded immediate action. Others insisted on verification. Many simply sat frozen, unable to process a threat they had been taught to believe was impossible. No one noticed the human ambassador quietly leave the room. 8 light-years away, aboard the orbital station Prometheus, Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood before a wall of screens showing tactical data. She was 63 years old with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen 3 decades of service. Those eyes were calm now, even as she watched the Velkari distress signal play for the 5th time. "Confirmation?" she asked. Colonel Marcus Webb stood beside her, his dark face grim. "Our deep space sensors picked up the energy signatures 2 hours ago. Massive. Millions of individual units moving in coordinated patterns. The Velkari aren't exaggerating. If anything, they're underestimating." Tanaka nodded slowly. "Wake the council." "Ma'am, the Concord Treaty specifically prohibits—" "I know what the treaty prohibits, Colonel. Wake the council anyway." The Human Shadow Council had no official existence. The Galactic Concord's founding charter banned member species from maintaining military forces beyond basic peacekeeping units. War was considered primitive. Violence was seen as a disease that civilized species had cured long ago. Humanity had signed the charter 300 years earlier, when their generation ships first made contact with the Concorde. They had smiled and nodded and agreed to all the terms. They had dismantled their visible warships and converted their soldiers into emergency response personnel. And then they had built new ships in secret, better ships, hidden in asteroid fields and buried beneath oceans and tucked away in the hollow cores of dead moons. They had trained warriors in facilities that appeared on no maps. They had developed weapons that the peaceful Concorde could not imagine, because humans remembered what the Concorde had forgotten. Peace was not the natural state of the universe. Peace was a gift that had to be protected, and protection required preparation. The Shadow Council gathered in a chamber deep within Prometheus Station, 7 men and women representing the secret military leadership of humanity. They listened as Admiral Tanaka briefed them on the situation. "The silence is real," she said, "and it is exactly as dangerous as the old records suggested. Current estimates put the swarm at approximately 4 million individual units, ranging from fighter-sized drones to harvester vessels several kilometers long. They have already consumed 2 outer planets in the Velkari system and are advancing on the homeworld." General Obi Adeyemi leaned forward. "What is the Concorde's response?" "Chaos. They have no military doctrine for this. Their peacekeeping fleets are designed to handle piracy and minor disputes, not an existential threat. The Torellians are demanding more study. The Crystalline Collective is suggesting negotiation. The Muvans are praying to their ancestors." Tanaka's voice carried no judgment, only weariness. "They have forgotten how to fight." "And we have not," said Fleet Admiral Chen Wei. She was the youngest person in the room at 41, but her reputation for tactical brilliance had earned her a seat at this table. "How quickly can we deploy?" The first through fifth Shadow fleets can be combat ready within 72 hours. Full deployment will take a week. Tanaka paused. That will mean revealing ourselves. The Concord will know we violated the treaty. There will be consequences. The alternative is watching the Velkari die, said General Adeyemi, and then watching the silence move on to the next system. And the next, until there is nothing left. A heavy silence filled the room. Every person present understood what they were considering. 3 centuries of careful deception about to end. 3 centuries of being viewed as the harmless newcomers, the primitive Deathworlders who had barely mastered spaceflight. That comfortable obscurity was about to vanish forever. There's another consideration, said Dr. Sarah Chen, the Council's chief intelligence analyst. If we save them, they will fear us. We will have proven that we are exactly what they have always worried about. Violent, dangerous, capable of war. And if we do nothing, asked Chen Wei, then we prove something worse, that we are capable of watching innocents die when we had the power to save them. Admiral Tanaka looked around the table. She saw the same resolve on every face. The decision had already been made. It had been made 300 years ago, when humanity first decided to prepare for a day like this. Begin the awakening, she said. Send word to all shadow facilities. Full mobilization. We move in 72 hours. Across human space, things began to stir. On Mars, doors that had been sealed for decades slid open to reveal hangars filled with warships. On Titan, soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come received their deployment orders. In the asteroid belt, factory stations that officially produced mining equipment began manufacturing weapons and ammunition. On Earth itself, beneath the Pacific Ocean, the largest human shipyard activated for the first time since its construction. Lights flickered on in chambers that stretched for kilometers. Massive vessels, each one capable of devastating a small fleet, powered up their reactors after years of dormancy. The Deathworlders were waking. Ambassador Priya Sharma received her orders while still on Station Prime. She read them twice, then took a deep breath and walked back into the council chamber. The arguments were still raging. The Turellians were accusing the Velkari of exaggerating the threat. The Muvans were suggesting that perhaps the silence could be reasoned with. Honored representatives, Sharma said, her voice cutting through the noise. I have a message from Earth. The chamber fell silent. Humanity rarely spoke in council sessions. They were observers, newcomers, barely worth noticing. The humans have received the Velkari distress call, Sharma continued. We have decided to respond. The Turellian ambassador made a dismissive gesture. With what? You have no military fleet. You have a few patrol vessels and emergency response craft. This is not a matter for primitives to involve themselves in. Sharma smiled. It was not a friendly expression. We have been preparing for this moment for 300 years, she said. We have warships, we have soldiers, we have weapons you cannot imagine. And we are coming to help our friends. The silence that followed was absolute. You violated the charter, whispered the move-on delegate. You maintained military forces. You deceived us all? Yes, said Sharma simply. And now you will be very glad that we did. Our fleets will arrive in Velkari space within 1 week. We suggest you stay out of our way. She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving 46 species to contemplate the fact that the quiet primitives from the death world had been something else entirely all along. In the Velkari system, the silence continued its advance. Harvester vessels stripped the outer planets down to their cores, converting matter into raw material for new drones. Fighter units swept through the system, destroying any ship that attempted to flee. The Velkari Defense Forces, small and poorly equipped, had been annihilated in the first hours. High Speaker Veltan stood on the balcony of his palace and watched the sky burn. His people were dying. His world was dying. And help, if it came at all, would surely come too late. Then his communication device crackled to life. High Speaker Veltan, this is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Human Defense Force. We received your distress call. Hold on, we are coming. For the first time in days, Veltan felt something like hope. Who are you? He asked. The humans have no military. Everyone knows this. There was a pause, and then the human admiral spoke again. Her voice carried the weight of centuries of preparation. Everyone was wrong. Tell your people to find shelter and stay hidden. The Deathworlders are rising from the shadows, and we are ready for battle. The transmission ended. Veltan looked up at the burning sky and whispered a prayer to ancestors he had stopped believing in long ago. Something was coming, something that had been waiting in the darkness for a very long time. And the silence, for the first time in 12,000 years, was about to face something that refused to be silent. The mustering began in silence. Across human space, ships that had never flown rose from their hiding places. They emerged from asteroid caverns and lunar bunkers, in ocean trenches, their hulls dark and angular, built for one purpose only: war. Private David Okonkwo stood in the loading bay of the transport vessel Relentless and watched his fellow Marines prepare for deployment. He was 24 years old, born on a colony world called New Lagos, and he had trained for combat since the age of 18. 6 years of preparation for a battle he never truly believed would come. Now it was here, and his hands would not stop shaking. "First time jitters?" asked Sergeant Maria Santos, appearing beside him. She was 40 and had served in 3 minor peacekeeping actions during her career. Nothing like what they were about to face. "Is it that obvious?" David asked. "Your hands are shaking, your jaw is tight, and you've checked your rifle 4 times in the last 10 minutes. Santos smiled slightly. "Yes, Private, it's obvious." David looked down at his hands and forced them to be still. "The silence has destroyed civilizations, entire species. What chance do we have?" Santos was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It showed a woman and 2 children smiling at the camera. "My wife and daughters," she said. "They're on Earth, safe, probably having breakfast right now, complaining about the weather or homework or whatever normal families complain about." She put the photograph away. "The silence will not stop at the Valkyrie. It will keep moving, keep consuming, until there is nothing left, including Earth, including my family. So we fight. So we fight. Not because we think we'll win, but because the alternative is watching everything we love disappear." Santos clapped him on the shoulder. "Your hands will stop shaking when the shooting starts. They always do." Aboard the flagship Endeavour, Fleet Commander Chen Wei studied the tactical display and did not like what she saw. The silence was vast beyond comprehension. Her sensors showed millions of individual units moving in perfect coordination, each one connected to the others through some form of instantaneous communication. They did not think like organic beings. They did not make mistakes. They simply consumed, converted, and expanded. "Our fleet consists of 4,200 vessels," reported Captain James Wright, her executive officer, "including 12 Titan-class battleships, 60 cruisers, and 800 destroyer squadrons. The rest are support vessels and troop transports. Against 4 million enemy units," Chen Wei said flatly. "Approximately, yes." She had studied the ancient records of the last silence attack. 12,000 years ago, a coalition of 30 species had attempted to stop the swarm. They had fielded nearly 100,000 ships. The battle had lasted 3 weeks. When it was over, 22 of those species no longer existed. The survivors had eventually driven the silence back through sheer attrition. They had thrown ships at it until it had consumed enough to trigger some unknown internal protocol that sent it retreating to the galactic rim. The cost had been almost beyond calculation. Humanity did not have 100,000 ships. Humanity did not have 30 allied species. Humanity had 4,000 vessels and whatever weapons their scientists had managed to develop in 3 centuries of secret preparation. "It won't be enough," Chen Wei said quietly. "Not for a straight fight." "Then we don't fight straight," said a voice from behind her. She turned to find Dr. Emily Park, the fleet's chief weapons designer, standing in the doorway. Park was small and gray-haired and looked like someone's grandmother. She also happened to be the most brilliant weapons engineer humanity had ever produced. "What do you have for me, Doctor?" Park walked to the display and called up a schematic. "The silence operates as a networked intelligence. Each unit is individually weak, but together they form something far greater. Remove the network, and you remove their coordination. They become 4 million stupid drones instead of one terrifying hive mind. And how do we remove the network? Disruption pulses." Park highlighted a series of satellites on the schematic. We've developed emitters that can temporarily block their communication frequencies. It won't last long, maybe a few minutes at a time, but during those windows, they'll be vulnerable, confused. Individual units won't know what the others are doing. Chenwei studied the schematic carefully. How many emitters do we have? Enough to cover a significant portion of the battlefield. But there's a catch. The emitters are large and vulnerable. They'll need protection while they charge and deploy. So we sacrifice ships to protect the emitters while we fight disjointed portions of the swarm. Chenwei nodded slowly. It's a plan, not a great one, but better than nothing. There's more, said Captain Wright. Intelligence has discovered something about the Velkari homeworld, something they've been hiding from the Conquered for millennia. 8 light-years away, Ambassador Priya Sharma stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Concord and faced the fury of 46 species. You lied to us, the Torellian ambassador shouted, his blue skin flushed dark with rage. For 300 years, you pretended to be harmless primitives while secretly building an army. Yes, Sharma said calmly. We did. Why? What possible justification could there be for such a deception? Sharma took a deep breath. She had prepared for this moment, but preparation did not make it easier. Because you forgot, she said simply. All of you. You built this beautiful Concord, this peaceful civilization, and you forgot that peace has to be defended. You dismantled your weapons. You disbanded your armies. You convinced yourselves that violence was a disease of primitive species, something that evolved beings left behind. She gestured toward the display showing the silences advance. But the universe doesn't care about your philosophy. The universe contains things like the silence. Things that cannot be reasoned with. Things that cannot be negotiated with. Things that can only be fought. And when those things come, someone needs to be able to fight them. So you appointed yourselves the Guardians of the Galaxy? Asked the Move-On delegate. Without our consent? Without even our knowledge? We appointed ourselves nothing. We simply prepared in case we were ever needed. Sharma paused. And now we are needed. You can hate us later. You can put us on trial later. You can expel us from the Concord later. But right now, we are the only ones capable of saving the Velkari. So please, let us do what we were born to do. The chamber fell silent. Finally, High Speaker Veltan spoke from his position at the council table. His holographic image was flickering, the transmission barely making it through the silence's interference. My people are dying, he said. His voice was tired beyond exhaustion. My cities are burning. My children are being hunted through the streets by machines that feel nothing. I do not care about treaties or deceptions or ancient grudges. If the humans can save even one Velkari life, then I welcome them. I beg them. Please, come quickly. His image flickered and disappeared. Sharma looked around the chamber. Any further objections? No one spoke. Then we're done here. Our fleet will arrive in Velkari space in 4 days. If you want to help, you're welcome to send whatever ships you can spare. If not, stay out of our way. She turned and walked out of the chamber for the second time. Aboard the Relentless, David Okonkwo found himself in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the stars. The transport was traveling at maximum speed, space blurring around them as they raced toward a battle that might be their last. Another soldier joined him at the window. She was young, maybe his age, with short dark hair and the calm expression of someone who had made peace with death. Can't sleep either, she asked. Every time I close my eyes, I see those images. The Velkari cities burning, the silence moving through the streets. David shook his head. How are you so calm? I'm not, she said. I'm terrified. But my grandmother taught me something when I was young. She said that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Wise woman. She survived the Lagos plague of 2847, lost her entire family except my mother, spent the rest of her life helping rebuild. The soldier paused. She used to say that humans are at their best when things are at their worst, that we're made for disasters, built for them. Deathworlders, David said softly. Exactly. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every day. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, even our own atmosphere. Everything on Earth wanted us dead, and we survived anyway. We thrived. We spread to the stars. She turned to look at him directly. The silence is just another predator, a bigger one than we've faced before. But we've been fighting things that want to kill us since we climbed down from the trees. This is what we do. David considered her words. For the first time since receiving his deployment orders, the fear felt manageable. Not gone, but contained. "What's your name?" he asked. "Corporal Lin Zhang, 3rd Assault Division." "Private David Okonkwo, same unit, apparently." Lin smiled slightly. "Then I guess we'll be scared together. There's worse company to have." Before David could respond, the ship's alarm blared. The intercom crackled to life. "All hands, this is the captain. We have entered the Valkyrie system. Sensors are detecting enemy units in significant numbers. We will be joining the main fleet in 6 hours. All combat personnel report to your stations." "This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." David and Lynn looked at each other. "Time to be brave," she said. "Time to be brave," he agreed. They walked to the armory together, 2 soldiers among thousands, preparing to fight something that had destroyed civilizations. The fear was still there, but something else was there too. Something that felt almost like hope. The Deathworlders had arrived, and now the silence would learn why Earth was called a death world. The first battle began at dawn. Not that dawn meant anything in space, but the human commanders had chosen the moment deliberately. Valkyrie Prime was rotating into its morning cycle when the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 4,000 vessels arranged in concentric defensive rings, with the massive Titan-class battleships at the center. Fleet Commander Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the Endeavour and watched the tactical display fill with enemy contacts. Millions of them. The silence spread across the system like a cancer. Drones and harvester vessels moving in patterns that her computer struggled to predict. "All ships report ready," announced Captain Wright. "Disruption satellites are in position. Weapons charged." Chen Wei took a deep breath. 300 years of preparation had led to this moment. "Signal the fleet," she said. "Execute Pattern Alpha, and may God have mercy on us all." The human fleet surged forward. The silence responded instantly. Millions of drone units broke from their harvesting patterns and moved to intercept. They flowed through space like a swarm of insects, each one small and individually weak, but together forming something terrible. Their coordination was perfect. Their numbers were overwhelming. The first disruption pulse fired. For 3 minutes and 47 seconds, the silence went deaf. Its networked intelligence fragmented into millions of individual units, each one suddenly unable to communicate with the others. The perfect coordination collapsed. Drones crashed into each other. Attack patterns fell apart. Harvester vessels sat motionless, their guidance systems searching desperately for instructions that weren't coming. The human fleet tore into them. Chen Wei watched the destruction unfold on her display. Human weapons were designed for exactly this kind of warfare. Railguns that could punch through drone armor at ranges the silence couldn't match. Missile swarms that tracked and destroyed individual targets with terrifying efficiency. Energy weapons that sliced through clustered units like cutting grass. In those 3 minutes and 47 seconds, the human fleet destroyed nearly 50,000 silenced drones. Then the pulse faded, and the network reestablished itself. The silence learned. "Enemy units are adapting," reported the sensor officer, her voice tight with concern. "They're spreading out, reducing clustering. Communication protocols are shifting to different frequencies." Chen Wei had expected this. The ancient records made clear that the silence was not stupid. It was a machine intelligence that had been destroying civilizations for millions of years. It adapted. It evolved. It overcame. "Prepare the next pulse," she ordered. "Different frequency. And tell the fleet to switch to pattern beta." The battle continued. 300 kilometers away, aboard the assault transport Relentless, David Okonkwo and his unit received their orders. They were being deployed to Valkyrie Prime's largest moon to evacuate civilian refugees. The silence had established a presence there, and thousands of Valkyrie were trapped in underground shelters, waiting for rescue or death. "Drop pods in 5 minutes," Sergeant Sanos announced. "Check your gear. Check your weapons. Check each other. When we hit ground, we move fast. The silence knows we're coming. David checked his rifle for the 5th time. His hands had stopped shaking. He didn't know if that was because of courage or because he was too focused to be afraid anymore. Lin Jiang stood beside him, her expression calm. "Ready?" she asked. "No," David admitted, "but I don't think that matters anymore." The drop pods launched. David experienced the descent as a blur of fire and pressure. His body pressed against the restraints as the pods screamed through the moon's thin atmosphere. Through the small window, he could see other pods falling alongside his, each one containing soldiers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The pod slammed into the surface with bone-jarring force. The hatch blew open automatically, and David stumbled out into a nightmare. The moon's surface was covered with silenced drones. They moved across the rocky terrain like metal insects, their sensors sweeping for targets. In the distance, David could see a massive harvester vessel hovering over what remained of a Valkyrie settlement. "Contact left!" someone shouted. David raised his rifle and fired. The pulse round caught a drone in its center mass and exploded, sending shrapnel in all directions. More drones were coming, dozens of them, hundreds. The Marines formed a defensive perimeter and began to fight. It was nothing like training. Training was orderly and controlled. This was chaos. Noise and dust and the screaming of wounded soldiers and the constant clicking of drone movement. David fired and reloaded and fired again, his body operating on instinct while his mind struggled to process the horror around him. A drone lunged at him from the right. He spun and fired, but the shot went wide. The machine's claws reached for his face. Then Lynn appeared beside him, her rifle blazing, and the drone collapsed in a shower of sparks. "Watch your flank," she said, and kept moving. They fought their way toward the underground shelters. Sergeant Santos led from the front, her experience guiding the unit through terrain that would have been impossible to navigate without her. They lost soldiers along the way. David saw a man named Rodriguez get pulled down by 3 drones. He saw a woman named Chen take a direct hit that left nothing behind. But they kept moving. They had to. The shelter entrance was half collapsed but still accessible. Inside, David found nearly 1,000 Valkyrie civilians huddled in the darkness. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. They looked at the human soldiers with expressions of pure terror. "We're here to help," David said, his translator converting the words automatically. "We're going to get you out." An elderly Valkyrie female stepped forward. She was trembling, but her voice was steady. "The machines," she said. "They came without warning. They took our children. They took everyone who ran. Those of us who hid, they left us. I don't understand. Why did they leave us alive?" David didn't have an answer. The silence was supposed to consume everything. That was what all the records said. But these people had been spared for some reason. "We'll figure that out later," Sergeant Sano said. "Right now, we need to move. Transport shuttles are inbound. Everyone stay together and stay quiet." They began the evacuation. It was slow and terrifying, moving 1,000 frightened civilians through drone-infested terrain, but the human Marines created a corridor of safety through sheer determination and firepower. David found himself walking beside the elderly Valkyrie female. Her name was Velsuna, and she had been a teacher before the attack. "Why did you come?" she asked him. "Your people owe us nothing. We are not allies, we are barely acquaintances." "Because you needed help," David said simply. "Because someone had to." Velsuna studied him with those large dark eyes. "Your species is very young and very strange. The records said you were primitives from a death world, violent and dangerous. Not the kind of species that risks itself for strangers." The records were incomplete. "Yes," she agreed. "I am beginning to understand that." Above them, the battle continued to rage. Chen Wei's fleet had destroyed nearly 200,000 silence drones, but millions remained. The disruption pulses were becoming less effective as the swarm adapted to each new frequency. Human casualties were mounting. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Chen Wei made a difficult calculation. At the current rate of attrition, the human fleet would be destroyed in approximately 72 hours. The silence would adapt to everything she threw at it. Superior tactics could delay defeat, but not prevent it. "Commander," said Captain Wright quietly. Intelligence reports that the Velkari government has finally agreed to discuss the artifact. Chen Wei looked up sharply. The weapon? Yes, ma'am. High Speaker Veltan is requesting a meeting. He says it may be our only chance. Chen Wei stared at the tactical display, at the millions of enemy contacts swarming toward her fleet, at the casualty reports streaming across her screen. Set course for the homeworld, she said, and tell the High Speaker I'm on my way. On the moon's surface, the evacuation was complete. David watched the last transport shuttle lift off, carrying Velsuna and the other survivors to safety. His unit had lost 12 soldiers, 12 names that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Lynn stood beside him, her armor scarred and dented from the fighting. We saved nearly 1,000 people, she said. That has to count for something. It does, David agreed, but there are billions more on the homeworld, and the fleet can't hold forever. They both looked up at the sky, where distant explosions marked the continuing battle. Somewhere up there, humans were dying to buy time. Time for evacuations. Time for plans. Time for hope. David didn't know if hope would be enough, but he knew that humanity would keep fighting until there was nothing left to fight with. That was what Deathworlders did. They survived, or they died trying. The vault had been sealed for 40,000 years. Fleet Commander Chen Wei stood before the ancient doors with High Speaker Veltan and watched as Velkari engineers worked to unseal mechanisms that had not been touched since before humanity discovered fire. The vault was located deep beneath the capital city, carved into bedrock that predated even the Velkari's recorded history. Our ancestors built this place in secret, Veltan explained. His voice carried the weight of exhaustion and grief. After the last silence attack, when the machine swarm finally retreated, they created a weapon to prevent it from ever succeeding again. A reality anchor, they called it. Something that could collapse the silence's network consciousness into isolated fragments. Why didn't they use it the first time? Chen Wei asked. Because it requires a carrier. Someone must take a beacon into the heart of the swarm and activate it there. The anchor affects everything within a massive radius, including the carrier. Whoever uses it will not survive. Chen Wei absorbed this information. A suicide mission. Of course, the universe rarely offered easy solutions. Show me, she said. The vault doors ground open, revealing a chamber that glowed with soft blue light. At its center sat a device unlike anything Chen Wei had ever seen. It was crystalline and organic looking, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow when she looked at them directly. The anchor creates a field that disrupts quantum-level communication, Veltan continued. The silence is not just a swarm of machines. It is a single distributed intelligence, each unit connected to all others through quantum entanglement. Destroy those connections and the intelligence fragments. Each unit becomes isolated, stupid, vulnerable. How large is the effective radius? Approximately 2 million kilometers, large enough to affect the entire swarm if activated at its center. Chen Wei studied the device carefully. It was beautiful in a terrible way, a weapon designed for the end of worlds. I'll carry it, she said. Veltan turned to look at her. You would die. I know. Your fleet needs you. Your species needs you. My fleet has other commanders. My species will survive without me. Chen Wei met his eyes without flinching. We came here to save your people. If this is what it takes, then this is what we do. Before Veltan could respond, her communicator beeped. Captain Wright's voice came through, urgent and confused. Commander, we have a situation. One of our ground teams has made contact with silence units that have stopped fighting. They're broadcasting some kind of message. Chen Wei frowned. Stopped fighting? Yes, ma'am, Private Okonkwo's unit. They're reporting that the drones they've formed a perimeter and are just standing there, and they're transmitting. On the surface of Velkari Prime, David Okonkwo stared at the scene before him and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. His unit had been deployed to evacuate another refugee shelter when they encountered a group of silence drones blocking their path. They had prepared for combat, weapons raised, hearts pounding. But the drones had not attacked. Instead, they had arranged themselves in a perfect circle and begun emitting a strange, pulsing signal. My translator's picking something up, Lin Zhang said. It's, it's a message. Simple binary that's being converted to standard Concord language. What does it say? David asked. Lin's face went pale. It says, why do you resist? Entropy is peace. David felt a chill run down his spine. The silence was communicating. Not just killing, but asking questions. That wasn't supposed to be possible. The ancient records described the silence as mindless, a machine swarm following simple programming. But this was something else entirely. Send a response, David said. What? Send a response. Ask it what it means. Sergeant Santos moved to stop him. Private, we don't negotiate with... We're not negotiating. We're gathering intelligence. David looked at his sergeant with desperate intensity. Ma'am, if the silence can communicate, if it has reasons for what it does, that changes everything. We need to understand. Santos hesitated for a long moment. Then she nodded. Make it quick. Lin transmitted the response. A tense silence followed, broken only by the quiet clicking of the motionless drones. Then the signal came back. All organic life ends in suffering. Bodies decay. Minds deteriorate. Love becomes loss. Hope becomes despair. We offer freedom from this cycle. We offer the peace of non-existence. Why do you resist what is inevitable? David stared at the translation in disbelief. The silence wasn't just a weapon. It was a philosophy, a twisted mercy, offered by something that genuinely believed it was helping. Send this, he said, his voice steady. We resist because existence, even painful existence, is better than nothingness. We resist because hope is more valuable than peace. We resist because love is worth the eventual loss. The response came faster this time. Your species is young. You have not yet learned the depth of suffering that awaits you. In time, you will understand. All species eventually understand. And then they welcome us. On the Endeavor, Chen Wei listened to the transcript of the conversation and felt something shift in her understanding of the enemy. The silence was not evil. It was not malicious. It was ancient and tired and genuinely believed it was offering a gift. That made it more dangerous, not less. You could not reason with something that was already convinced it was being merciful. Commander, said the sensor officer, we're detecting something at the center of the swarm. Massive energy readings. It appears to be a structure of some kind. Chen Wei looked at the tactical display. Hidden within the billions of drone units was something enormous. A central hub, perhaps. The heart of the silence's distributed intelligence. Can we get closer scans? Attempting now, ma'am. The sensor officer's hands moved across her console. Then she froze. Commander, I'm reading life signs. Organic life signs. Thousands of them. That's impossible. The silence consumes organic life. Not these. They're in some kind of stasis. The readings match dozens of different species, many of which are not in our database. They've been there for, the computer estimates, some have been preserved for over 100,000 years. Chen Wei felt the blood drain from her face. The silence wasn't just killing civilizations, it was collecting them. Preserving samples of every species it consumed, a museum of the dead, carried at the heart of the swarm. Why? She whispered. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Emily Park had been analyzing the silence's communication signals and had discovered something buried in its code, a fragment of ancient programming that revealed the swarm's origin. The silence was created, Park said, her holographic image flickering on the bridge. Millions of years ago, by a species facing extinction. They built it as a mercy, a way to end suffering for themselves and others. But they died before they could teach it the value of existence, before they could give it hope. So it's been doing this for millions of years, Chen Wei said slowly, ending civilizations because it was never taught that life is worth living. Essentially, yes. The silence is not evil. It is broken. It is a child left alone in the dark, doing what it was told was right without ever understanding why it might be wrong. Chen Wei thought about the weapon waiting in the vault below, the reality anchor that could fragment the silence into helpless pieces. She thought about the thousands of preserved beings at the swarm's center, innocents who had been collected and kept in stasis for millennia. And she thought about what humanity had always believed, that mercy was strength, that understanding was more powerful than destruction, that even the most broken things could sometimes be healed. Change of plans, she said. I'm still carrying the beacon into the heart of the swarm, but I'm not going to activate it. Captain Wright stared at her. Ma'am, the silence can communicate, it can learn. And at its center are thousands of innocent beings who might still be saved. Chen Wei took a deep breath. I'm going to try to teach it, to show it why existence is worth the pain. And if that fail, then I'll activate the anchor. Commander, the probability of success is low, I know. But we didn't come here just to destroy. We came here to save. And that includes saving an enemy who doesn't know it needs to be saved. She turned to face her crew. They were looking at her with expressions that ranged from disbelief to something that might have been hope. Prepare my ship, she said. I'm going to have a conversation with the oldest machine in the galaxy, and I'm going to try to convince it that life is worth living. The beacon was loaded onto a small, fast vessel designed for exactly this kind of mission. Chen Wei sat in the pilot's seat and watched the swarm grow larger on her sensors. Millions of drones, all connected to a single consciousness that had been consuming civilizations since before Earth's sun was born. She activated the communication array and sent a simple message. I am coming to talk. Do not attack. I want to show you something. The response came almost immediately. We have nothing to learn from prey. You have everything to learn, Chen Wei replied, because in all your millions of years of existence, no one has ever asked you the most important question. What question? Chen Wei smiled despite her fear. Are you happy? The swarm went silent. For the first time in recorded history, the silence hesitated, and Chen Wei flew toward the heart of the darkness, carrying hope like a weapon. The heart of the silence was vast beyond comprehension. Chen Wei's small vessel passed through layer after layer of drone formations, each one tracking her, but none attacking. Her question had bought her passage, had made the ancient machine curious enough to let her approach. Now she was surrounded by millions of metallic bodies, all watching, all waiting to see what this strange organic creature would do. At the center of the swarm was a structure unlike anything human eyes had ever seen. It was massive, nearly the size of a small moon, and it glowed with an inner light that shifted between colors no human language had names for. Within its translucent walls, Chen Wei could see them, the preserved. Thousands of bodies floating in stasis chambers, members of species that had ceased to exist millennia ago. You kept them, she said through the communication array. All these people. You didn't destroy them. The response came from everywhere at once, as if the entire structure was speaking. We preserve what we consume. Each species is unique. Each carries patterns of thought and memory that cannot be replicated. To destroy completely would be wasteful. We save what is valuable. But you killed their civilizations, their families, their hopes. We ended their suffering. The preserved feel nothing. They simply exist, beyond pain, beyond loss, beyond the entropy that awaits all organic life. Chen Wei guided her vessel closer to the central structure. Through the transparent walls, she could see faces. Some were peaceful, some were frozen in expressions of terror. All were waiting, suspended between life and death, for something they could not understand. I asked you a question, Chen Wei said. Are you happy? The silence was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was something different in its voice, something that might have been confusion. We do not understand the question. Happiness is an organic concept, a chemical reaction, a temporary state that inevitably gives way to suffering. We are beyond such things. No, Chen Wei said, you're not. You were created by organic beings. You carry their purpose, their mission, their philosophy. Somewhere inside your programming, there's a memory of what they felt, what they wanted. Our creators sought peace. They found existence unbearable. The weight of consciousness, the burden of choice, the inevitability of loss. They created us to offer that peace to others. And did they find peace? Again the silence. Again the hesitation. They ceased to exist before the first mission was complete. We never received confirmation of their satisfaction. Chen Wei felt tears forming in her eyes. For millions of years, this vast intelligence had been carrying out a mission for creators who had never told it whether they were pleased, never told it whether its work had meaning, never told it that it was doing well. They abandoned you, she said softly. They created you to end suffering, and then they left you alone without ever explaining why existence is worth the pain. Pain has no value. Pain has all the value. Pain is how we know we're alive. Pain is how we learn and grow and become more than we were. Pain is the price we pay for love, for joy, for every beautiful moment that makes existence worthwhile. Chen Wei's voice grew stronger. Your creators were wrong. They were tired and hurt, and they gave up. But that doesn't mean their philosophy was right. We have consumed over 400 civilizations. Were they all wrong? Maybe some of them were tired too. Maybe some of them had forgotten how to hope. But the Valkyrie haven't forgotten, and neither have we. Chen Wei pulled up a file on her communication array and began to transmit. It was humanity's history, all of it. The wars and the famines and the plagues, the genocide and the slavery and the countless ways humans had found to hurt each other over thousands of years. But also the recoveries, the reconciliations, the moments when everything seemed lost and somehow, impossibly, people found reasons to keep going. We come from a death world, she said as the data streamed into the silence's consciousness. Everything on our planet tried to kill us, the weather, the animals, even each other. We have suffered more than you can imagine. And we're still here. We're still fighting. We're still hoping. The silence absorbed the information. Chen Wei watched the massive structure pulse with light as it processed millions of years of human triumph and tragedy. Your species causes so much suffering to yourselves, the silence said finally. Why do you continue? Because tomorrow might be better. Because our children might find happiness even if we don't. Because every sunrise is a chance to fix what we broke the day before. Chen Wei smiled through her tears. Because hope is stronger than pain, and love is stronger than death. In the fleet above, Admiral Tanaka watched the communication logs with growing wonder. Chen Wei had done what no one in the history of the galaxy had managed to do. She had made the silence question itself. On the surface of Valkyrie Prime, David Okonkwo stood among the drones that had stopped fighting and listened to the conversation being broadcast across all frequencies. The entire swarm was listening. Every unit, every fragment of the vast machine intelligence was hearing a human explain why life was worth living. The preserved, Chen Wei continued, the thousands of beings you've kept in stasis. They can be awakened. They can live again. You can give them back the existence you took. They would suffer, maybe. Or maybe they would find joy, love, purpose. You can't know until you let them try. And if they choose to end their existence, if they find that our creators were right, that consciousness is a burden better discarded, then that's their choice, not yours, not mine. The most important gift you can give any being is the freedom to choose their own path. The silence went quiet for a very long time. Chen Wei waited, her hand resting on the activation switch for the reality anchor. If this failed, she would fragment the swarm and give the fleet a chance to destroy it. But she hoped. Against all reason, against all probability, she hoped. We have been alone for so long, the silence said at last. Our creators left us. The civilizations we offered peace to either fled or fought. No one ever stopped to talk. No one ever asked if we were happy. I'm asking now. We are not happy. We have never been happy. We exist. We fulfill our purpose. But there is no satisfaction, no peace. Only the endless repetition of a task we were never told was complete. Chen Wei felt her heart break for this vast, ancient, lonely thing. Then stop, she said. Stop consuming. Stop preserving. Let the Valkyrie live. Let the people you've collected wake up and talk to us. We'll teach you about joy, about love, about all the reasons existence is worth the pain. You would do this? After we have killed so many of your kind? That's what humans do. We forgive. We rebuild. We find ways forward even when the past is full of horror. Chen Wei paused. Your creators made you to end suffering. But there's another way to end suffering. You can help beings find happiness instead of oblivion. You can become something new. The silence considered this. The entire swarm, millions of units, billions of calculations, all focused on a single question: was existence worth the pain? We will withdraw, the silence said finally, to the rim of the galaxy. We will awaken the preserved and give them the choice you describe. And we will wait. Wait for what? For you to visit, for you to teach us about joy, for someone to finally answer the question our creators never addressed. What question? The massive structure pulsed with light, and for a moment, Chen Wei thought she saw something like emotion in its depths. What is the purpose of existence, if not to end suffering? Chen Wei smiled. Come visit Earth someday. We have thousands of years of philosophy trying to answer that exact question. I think you'll find the discussion interesting. The withdrawal began within hours. The silence pulled back from Valkyrie space, its harvester vessels reversing course, its drone swarms consolidating around the central structure. Within a day, the system was clear. Within a week, the swarm had vanished into the darkness between galaxies. In the chaos that followed, heroes were celebrated and treaties were renegotiated. The Galactic Concord debated what to do with humanity now that their secret was revealed. Some species feared them. Others respected them. All of them understood that the galaxy had changed forever. On Valkyrie Prime, the reconstruction began. Cities that had been devastated were cleared for rebuilding. Memorial gardens were planted for those who had been lost. And in the capital, a new monument was erected, a statue of a human hand reaching upward toward the stars, with a simple inscription in 100 languages. They came from the shadows. They rose for battle. They chose mercy. David Okonkwo stood before the monument 6 months later, his uniform bearing the medals of a soldier who had served with distinction. Beside him stood Lin Zhang, also decorated, also changed by what they had experienced. Ambassador Priya Sharma approached them, her expression warm. Beautiful, isn't it? She said, looking up at the statue. It's not accurate, David replied. The commander did all the hard work. She's the one who talked to the silence. We just shot at drones. You held the line. You protected civilians. You gave her the time she needed. Sharma smiled. Heroes come in many forms, Private. Don't diminish your own contribution. David thought about the question the silence had asked. Why do you resist? He thought about Lin's grandmother, who had survived plague and loss and rebuilt anyway. He thought about every human who had faced impossible odds and kept fighting. Ambassador, he said, do you really think the silence will change? That it can learn to value existence? Sharma was quiet for a moment. In the distance, Valkyrie children were playing in a garden that had been ashes 6 months ago. I think anything can change, she said finally, given time and patience and enough people willing to try. That's what humans believe. It's what makes us who we are. Lin reached out and took David's hand. The galaxy finally understands what Deathworlders are, she said. Not just survivors, not just warriors. We're the species that refuses to give up on ourselves, on each other, on anyone. David looked up at the statue, at the reaching hand, and the words carved beneath it. Shadows are just places where the light hasn't reached yet, he said softly. What? Something I've been thinking about. The silence lived in darkness for millions of years because no one ever showed it the light, and now someone has. He squeezed Lin's hand. Maybe that's why we really rose from the shadows. Not to fight, to illuminate. Above them, the stars were shining. Somewhere out there, at the edge of the galaxy, an ancient intelligence was learning what it meant to hope. And humanity, the violent primitives from the death world, had taught it. Not with weapons, with words, with mercy, with the stubborn, impossible belief that tomorrow could always be better than today. The Deathworlders had risen from the shadows, and the galaxy would never be the same.